Hi, I'm RebelRC61, and this will be the first in a series of videos that I'm going to be doing on the subject of model kit building. This video, as well as the next several in this series, will serve as a introduction, talking about the various tools and materials you'll need to build a model kit. Later on, I'll be doing build walkthroughs showing you various tips, techniques, what have you, on doing the actual building, as well as gradually going with increasingly more difficult and complex kits, including adding in photo etch detail parts, working with resin, what have you. Now, obviously in this video I may throw around a couple terms that you may not recognize. These will typically relate to techniques that I'll show later on. Now, obviously the first step you're going to need to take in getting into model kit building is to buy a model kit. There's a broad range of subjects available: military vehicles, aircraft, science fiction, figures, the list goes on. What it will ultimately come down to is, what do you want to build, how big you want it, and how much money are you willing to spend. So after you make this decision and get a kit, you're going to need some way to build it. The single most important tool you'll want to get is a Exacto Knife. They're available just about everywhere. You can get them in hobby stores, craft stores, Walmart even. You can buy the blades in bulk. I'd recommend number 11 blades. It's what I use. I've never had any problems with them. What's great about Exacto blades is that they're basically your most general purpose tool. You can use them to trim parts off sprue trees. You can use them to clean up cuts from tree. You can make modifications to parts, damage, and you can really use it for just about everything. So definitely get an Exacto blade first thing. It will definitely help you later on and make your life a lot easier. The next tool you're going to probably want to get is a Sprue Cutter. There's a couple different kinds. This kind is the flat flush kind. They're really good for trimming parts off trees, as you can get a very flush, neat cut, which will save you some time later on when you're cleaning up. Downside is that they're only really good for plastic, as they won't cut metal, and I haven't used them on resin, but I'm going to assume similar, or very least it will be not as good for the tool. But for those, I'd recommend these, the cross kind. As I said, they'll cut metal. I also would recommend using them if you're cutting off small parts, as you can just use them to cut part of the actual sprue tree further up away from the part, so as you won't potentially damage it, and more importantly, it's easier to find. This will be especially true when you're painting. Now, once you've got the part off the tree, you're going to probably want to clean up that cut, as you don't want an ugly part. So for that, you're going to need sandpaper. I'd recommend definitely getting sandpaper that you can use wet, as wet sanding cuts down on the amount of dust in the air and also produces a better finish. I'd also recommend getting it from a hardware store as opposed to a hobby store, as they're generally a lot cheaper at hardware stores. However, they typically will only have very coarse grits there, but it will ultimately save you a little money. As far as a range, I'd recommend at first getting a range between 400 and 1000 grit, as this will provide you with plenty of sanding power for both situations where you need to sand away a lot of material and for finishing and polishing. Now, ultimately, you're going to need to adjust this based on what you're working with. Such as resin, you'll want to get coarser grits, as resin is much harder material, and the finer grits really won't do much damage to the part. whereas if you're working primarily with plastics, you'll want it to end to the finer grits as opposed to coarse grits. Additionally, you can get even higher still grits for polishing. Now, obviously, once you've got the part off sanded, you're going to need some way to assemble, and for that you're going to need glue. The first glue type is the plastic cement sort of type. It's a liquid. This type is by Testers. You can find it in hobby stores, and it works basically by you apply it to both sides of the place where you're going to combine the parts, and it will start eating a little away at the plastic, and then once you put them together, it will essentially weld the two together, and you'll typically see a little ooze line between the two. And once they've had a chance to cure, set up, and harden, you can then come back and sand that away, and it'll look as though the two were basically done together. Next type is your basic super glue. I use Zap-A-Gap. It's very common, at least where I live. What's great about it is that it cures and holds up almost immediately. Additionally, it will bond anything, something that the other kind won't do, as it's only good for plastics. At the same time, that's also a bad thing, as you'll typically more often not be gluing yourself together. So you need to be careful. Additionally, it doesn't bond the strongest. It's a fairly brittle bond. So if you need to bond something that's actually got a hold and support weight, you're going to need something stronger. And for that, you're going to need epoxy. I just go with the kind available from Walmart. It's cheap, readily available. This type of glue works by essentially you have two parts, the epoxy and the hardener, and you basically squirt them out, combine them together, mix them up, and then apply them to where you want to glue your part, and then it will set up, cure, and harden. The problem with it is obviously you have to mix it, so it's a little hard to work with. But what's really great about it is it has the strongest bond possible, typically in the order of several thousand pounds per inch, which is great if you need something to hold weight, such in case of resin kits, where typically you're going to need to actually first pin a joint and then glue both sides together to that pin. Again, talk about that later when we get into resin. The other type of glue that I use is another by Testers. It's a type of gel. It was the first type of glue I was using when I was building models. It's common. You can get it at almost every hobby store. It's in a lot of ways it's between the liquid glue of the plastic cement type and the super glue, in that it's a little stronger, a little nicer, but at the same time it's got its own ups and downs. I typically use it when I'm gluing clear parts, as I've just found it's what works best for me. You just apply a little to the clear part, and that's about it. The last glue, which some people use for assembling clear parts, is just your Elmer's school glue. What's nice about it is it dries clear, so even if you apply a lot, it's not going to show up later on, or at least not be as visible. It won't mar the clear, so you'll still be able to see in. And some people have a lot of luck with it. Personally, I haven't, but it's an option out there. And looks like I'm just about out of time for this video. So next video I'll continue on discussing more tools you'll probably need, and till then.